Hey there guys, we're taking a look at this HP Pavilion 15-inch that I recently picked up at Walmart. The specific model is on the screen right now. Now this is spec'd with the Ryzen 5 5500U, 8GB of DDR4 RAM at 3200 MHz, and a 512GB SSD. All of this at a normal retail price of $550. Now with those specs and that price point, it's not necessarily the most aggressively priced product. What really makes this an improvement over the previous one that I had is the fact that it actually has an IPS display. And alongside with having a better screen, it actually has a better keyboard and trackpad compared to the previous one I tested. Overall, there is a noticeable improvement in quality here, even down to the construction itself. In terms of ports, we actually have a very limited selection. On one side, we have a single USB with a charging port and a Kensington lock, and then on the other side, we have a headphone jack, a micro SD, a USB-C port, and a USB full size alongside a HDMI port. In terms of setup, I actually picked up this laptop stand that matches this laptop perfectly. I absolutely love the finish of it, and it goes so well with it. And really, you don't need active cooling for these kinds of things. Normally, just raising the laptop lets the fans breathe a little better. So I really like that for the setup. The next thing that I use is actually this Anker USB-C dock. And specifically, the reason that I use this is because of the fact that it has a full-size Ethernet port, and it gives me some extra USB ports. Now, it also has HDMI, though I almost never use the HDMI on there because usually it's limited and you can't get like 1440p high refresh rate out of it. And finally, the last part of the setup is, of course, an external SSD, specifically this one that I just have using this external SSD adapter. It's actually just a USB to SATA interface, and it's very necessary because 512 gigabytes is just not enough storage for a lot of modern games. I was actually hoping to see an improvement in the cooling performance on this chassis over the previous one, but unfortunately it's about equal performance. But at least the usability aspects of it have been improved. While overall I'm happy over the improvements that I've gotten out of this laptop versus the previous one, there are some issues still with this specific laptop. Specifically, and it's kind of ironic, the display itself is somewhat of an issue, and the battery life. Now, the issue with the display really is just the fact that it is a very dim IPS display. It's only 250 nits, so in a dark room it looks fine, but as soon as you turn on a bright light, it can start to get hard to see, and since it's a glossy display, the reflections can be pretty brutal. It's still a huge improvement though over the TN panel that was in the other model. This is really what I consider baseline for modern laptop. Really, these AMD APUs have just not ceased to surprise me in how good a performance you can get out of them. Even at the stock 15 watts, you can get some very playable frame rates in games like Fortnite. But when you use a program like the AMD APU tuning utility to unlock the wattage to 25 watts, you actually unlock a lot of performance. If you temper your expectations, you can actually get some very decent performance in some modern AAA titles. I mean, we are playing God of War right here at above 30 FPS average at the lowest possible settings. Now, of course, temporal upscaling is helping a lot here, but I mean, it's still a playable experience here. That being said, the experience isn't perfect because of the limited RAM. Since we only have 8 gigabytes at stock configuration, there are going to be certain games that are going to give you a lot of problems because you are going to be essentially limited on VRAM. One of those games, for example, is Far Cry 6. That game continued to crash sporadically because of the fact that we just did not have enough RAM. And this was a reoccurring problem in certain modern titles. But if you're a patient gamer or an indie game enthusiast, or you just like to play older AAA titles, you can play those at 1080p with the lowest settings, no problem, with some very good FPS. Or if you want to get aggressive with it, you can drop the resolution to 720p. And Watch Dogs, for example, is actually playable at 30 FPS with ultra settings at 720p, which gets you a better gaming experience than if you played this on consoles when it came out. As for how it performs outside of gaming, though, it can actually do pretty well in a lot of other things, except you become very limited by RAM in general. 8 gigabytes is just what I consider to be the absolute bare minimum for usability nowadays. And because of that, you end up in a situation situation where you become RAM limited very quickly. For example, video editing is going to be difficult to do here unless you're going to be working with only 1080p content and you plan on not doing very intensive effects at all. And it's not really because we don't have the horsepower for it, it's because we don't have the RAM for it. Honestly, if you slap some 32 gigabyte sticks into this laptop, you can get some very, very good editing performance on this laptop. But with only 8 gigabytes, it really struggles to do even the most basic tasks when it comes to video editing. It can do fine with things like photo editing, considering that a lot of that is usually just single threaded and it tends to not eat up a lot of RAM, but in certain situations it can actually end up doing that, specifically if you're working with some very, very large resolutions. I know because sometimes some of the thumbnails that I use are made using game asset pictures that tend to be very, very high in resolution, usually almost into the 10,000 pixels by 10,000 pixel range. And those kinds of picture files actually end up eating up a lot of RAM, and it can be very difficult to work with those kinds of things. So even I ran into bottlenecks when it came to working with really, really large photo files. Of course, if you're going to be upgrading the RAM, I recommend actually upgrading the SSD, and here's another one of the issues that I have with this laptop. One is the fact that you only actually get one SSD slot, which limits your expandability. Now, you do get the full 2 SODIMM slots, so you can at least properly expand the memory, but you are limited by that one SSD slot. Now, getting access though, you only have these 2 visible screws and the rest are hidden underneath these strips right here. This is extremely annoying, and I'm gonna hate having to deal with that when I actually get some RAM in, but it's gonna be something that has to be done. While the performance is really great, and I do like the improvements over the previous HP that we looked at, my main issue is really the price point. $550 is just such an expensive price point, but luckily I was actually able to pick this up as a refurbished unit for only $340. At that price point, it's pretty much a no-brainer because now it's just a straight improvement over the previous one and it's cheaper. Overall, I'm very happy with the refurbished deal, but I really just cannot recommend this thing at the full price. What I would recommend is wait for a sub $500 deal or pick up the 5700U version of this laptop for just $50 more. Or you could just be like me and troll around until the refurbished deals come back and you can pick one of those up for a huge discount. Anyways, I hope you found this video useful. If you did, be sure to subscribe. We're going to be testing this laptop out a lot more on the channel, and of course, look forward to the video where we're going to be upgrading the RAM and the SSD on this laptop. And of course, if you're interested in picking up any of the laptops shown or mentioned in this video today, they are down in the description below with the affiliate links that help support the channel. So please use those because they really, really help a lot. I really appreciate it. I'll see you guys next time.